The big policy story of the day really is the pension bill that has been approved in the Lok Sabha. To take that story forward, we've got Ashwin Parekh, the National Leader of Global Financial Services at Ernst & Young. Thanks very much for being with us, Mr. Parekh. This bill debuted first in 2005. It has now been cleared. How big a boost do you really think this is to the financial reform process?
Well, to begin with, I must say that, apart from the implication that it might have, it's a huge reform to the extent that an organization that was created for pensions and for, security, that is social security to be provided for people who complete their working age, it was hanging there by way of ordinances which kept on coming up, and we were waiting for the parliament to approve this particular important reform. It has happened today, and therefore in the history of pension funds in India, it's really a historical day. It is very significant to the extent that we have to accept that India needs substantial amount of infrastructure funds. The long-term funds, the long-term savings, we can come only from out of life and pension sector. And between life and pension, as we go along, living longer is becoming a larger threat than death, and therefore to that extent pension becomes very, very critical as a saving instrument. This particular bill empowers now the authority to have its own organization, run its own set of, and create regulations, more importantly, particularly in the voluntary pension areas. So I would say that certainly it's a significant reform, and really we must say it's happened today, so it's a big day, from the pension point of view.
A big day indeed, but at least the sector has been opened up for FDI. But the fact is that the government wanted 49% FDI, the opposition was unrelenting, and which is why it has now been linked to insurance, which is still at 26%. Do you think that's a bit of a dampener here, and are you disappointed we could not push through 49% really?
Yes, it's a bit of a dampener to the extent that, I suppose we're just repeating another mistake. We made one mistake when we did the insurance amendment, when we did the Insurance Act. There was absolutely, no need for us to really hardcast 26% in the Act itself. We could have left it open and given the powers to the regulator, perhaps, to allow the regulator to examine the need for more FDI. We did not do that. We all recognize we made that mistake. We never moved from 26 to 49 in all these 12 years. Now we are repeating such a similar mistake in PFRDA as well. The only consolation, however, that can be drawn is that the amounts are not significant, because pension in its current form in the NPS means accumulation, just the accumulation stage of pension. The annuity stage of the pension will still be given to life companies, where more capital will be required by life companies. So to that extent, I should say pension fund managers will not, they run out of fiduciary risk, they don't have capital risk to worry about. And to that extent, there isn't substantial amount of capital required by the PFM companies, the pension fund manager companies. And to that extent, the amounts we're talking about is not substantial, I should say.
What are the obvious ramifications of this bill? And of course, this will have to be passed by the Rajya Sabha, which is perhaps only a formality now. But what are the absolute ramifications of this on the stock markets, considering this is the first time that this money can actually be invested in Indian equities?
Well, I see long-term implications. Already in the mandatory reforms and the pension reforms, we were bold enough in 2005 itself to move away from defined benefits to defined contribution kind of an arrangement. Now, so therefore, all the government and semi-government employees and state government employees, that is whether at the central level or state level, have now to participate in the mandatory new pension scheme, NPS scheme of PFRDA. To that extent, we've really reduced a lot of burden on our financial budgets annually, and it's a funded program. The same thing, if it can be replicated in the voluntary pension, that is in the unorganized sector, if we can make attractive products, if PFRDA can do that, and bring more and more people to the NPS scheme, then to that extent, I would say we would have really created long-term savings in the economy, and to that extent, those funds will be then available for infrastructure funding.
I have a quick question for Mr. Dhirendra Kumar, the CEO of Value Research, who joins us on the phone line as well. From a personal finance point of view, Dhirendra, how big do you think this move really is, and how should this really impact investors, especially given this is pension money? This was always considered sacrosanct, shouldn't be touched upon, but here this is. The sector has finally been opened up.
No, I don't see the significance of this at all, because there are two parts to it. One is that the central government employees who came on board on after 1st of April 2004, they are part of it anyway. So this is just giving a legal sanction, because PFRDA was functioning by an executive order. Now it will be a statutory body. That apart, the voluntary part of it, for which, there is 100 crore grant from every budget for the last 2 years, the Swavalamban scheme, it has been, it has not found many takers, and it has been pushed hard. And the government employees' experience with NPS has not been magical as it could have been, because it was actually not a non-starter from 2004, and it is not in the form as it was initially planned. So because initially the feature of the program was that individual employees will be able to choose their pension fund manager. They'll be able to choose the allocation they want, or the default could be, if they don't choose any, then the default could be the auto plan. So all those things never happened. Now it is almost like a stated allocation. Of course, there is a huge migration. It is a big reform which happened before, that from defined benefit to defined contribution. But, the government's liability comes to an end. And I think the money has not been mismanaged, but has not been optimally managed so far.
All right, not optimally managed money. There are two views to this pension bill, and we'll, of course, track that in greater detail. Completely out of time here on this edition of Rush Hour. It's been a pleasure being with you. Keep watching ET Now. News and updates follow.